Hi friends, Evelina here. Welcome to the Homecomings podcast, an Audible initiative sharing vulnerable conversations with purpose-driven creatives on their life journeys, all with the intention to inspire people listening to discover the meaning of home in their own lives and come deeper back to their truest versions of self. We use home as a metaphor to represent all that beckons comfort, familiarity, and belonging for your unique life journey. Whether that's through the work that you do, the people you surround yourself with, or the things that bring you the most joy in life. Because to live a life with more home means to live a more mindful and beautiful life. And isn't that the greatest intention for us all? I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Homecomings podcast. I'm your host, Evelina Olachowska, brand strategist and designer, working with big purpose-driven creatives to help connect them to their big and beautiful purposes in this world. I'm really pumped for this one with my dear guest, Chay Nott, who is on the show today. To give a little bit of background on Chay, he is a young founder in his early 20s who founded his media company, Nott Shotts, where he works with e-commerce businesses to generate all of their product creative. We focus a lot on business in this conversation. So for any business owners or fellow entrepreneurs who are tuning in, there are a lot of powerful, just tactical, tangible takeaways that Chay shares from how he's been able to build his business and different points in his journey that he's navigated, such as hiring a team and what outsourcing looks like. He leaves us with a lot of great just takeaways from his experience of what it looks like to contract out work and what that means for revenue. We talk very transparently about money in this conversation and how a lot of times when growing a business, especially in the early days, you're compromising on pay so that you can grow your business, so that you can make the connection, so that you could grow your network. And there's an element of trust that's involved. Absolutely. I think for all business owners, there is this commitment to surrender, but also committing to just knowing that what you are putting in, you will get back in return. We can call it the law of reciprocity. It's something that Chay actually mentions in this episode, or other people could call it karma. You know, what goes around comes around. But I think the overarching theme or idea is that when we anchor into something that is authentic and aligned to us and for us, and we are lit up by it, and our intention is rooted in something bigger than ourselves, beyond monetary goals, but starts to touch on the other, the person that you're serving. I think it always fascinates me so much when I ask my guests and clients, especially who are business owners, like what drives you, what motivates you, why did you start your business? I always want to know, like, what are you in this for? Because entrepreneurship it's not an easy ride. It is fulfilling, but then there's so much sacrifice and there's so much learnings and teachings and hardship and ups and downs and all the things. So I always want to know, what are the drivers behind why you do what you do? So Chay shares his perspective on why he started his business, what that journey looked like for him. So the fact that Chay is 21 years old and he's getting after it, already I'm like, whoa, it's really inspiring. And while I totally appreciate this quality about Chay, I think what I appreciate even more is his deep transparency and acknowledgement that he's just figuring it out. Like, he's a young guy just taking it one day at a time, doing what lights him up, being committed to living his best version of self. And he doesn't have all the answers. I asked him a few questions where he flat out was like, I don't freaking know. And I was like, yo, hell yeah. Like, you admitting that you are learning, that you are a constant student, that you are on this path of discovering every single day. But nonetheless, you're on the path. I think there's so many people that wait to start that project, start that business venture, do that thing because they feel like, well, I'm not good enough, or I don't have XYZ skills, or I need to either save this amount of money or learn this amount of skills or whatever it is. And they keep kicking the can down the road to where maybe they end up doing it in 10 or 20 years' time, And a lot of times they never end up doing it. So there's definitely something to be said about just freaking doing it. Because a lot of times, and I could speak for myself when it's come to my own business journey, there was so much that I felt like I needed to know or have figured out before I felt air quotes ready to finally start my business. And I'll never forget, I've talked about this, I think, multiple times on the show. Definitely in episode 1 of season 1, where I share my business journey, where I just never felt fully ready to start my business. And I was working with a mentor at the time. I call him my mentor. He was one of my clients who became more of a mentor, who was witnessing my journey unfolding of I was still at my agency job in Boston. I was freelancing at the side, and he gently was nudging me. He's like, Evelina, you're ready. Like, start the business. I'm like, no, Josh, like, I can't do it. Like, I need to save more money. I need to get more clients, XYZ. And ultimately, pandemic year, my company laid me off. And I was like, oh shit. Like, okay, I guess I'm freaking doing this. So God literally shoved me because I think he saw that I was dragging my feet and stalling. And once I was free falling off the cliff, I was free falling and I was figuring it out. And it wasn't up until I was like actually off the cliff, like literally falling, that's when the clarity came. That's when the rubber met the road. And that's where all the teachings came up and I was in it. So there's something to be said about just doing it, ripping the band-aid off and going for it and trusting that you have everything you need to do this if you want it badly enough. Of course, you have to get to that point where you realize you want to do this, but it takes a level of discernment, and I struggle and I still navigate this to this day of recognizing like what is that boundary or that threshold for me where I'm ready to do this, but I'm just procrastinating because there's either fear that's coming up, or maybe I need a little bit more time because I'm unprepared, like actually unprepared, and it could be too risky, like the risk versus reward kind of a thing. But ultimately, it's like trusting yourself that you have what you need to get to where you need to be and you're going to figure it out. So I'm excited to bring you guys this episode today. If you enjoy this one, please share with a friend and consider leaving a rating and review for the show. It would mean so much and help boost the show's growth. That being said, here is my lovely conversation with my dear friend, Chay Nott. Chay, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing super, super good. I got a cup of coffee in my hand, so it's always a good day.
Yes, your latte looks delicious. I saw the froth. Did you froth that
Yes,
yourself?
I did. I did. I did. I did.
It
It
looks
was. It's
magical.
probably. It's don't be fooled. It's probably the best froth I've done in the last like 4 weeks.
Oh,
I
that's
literally.
perfect.
It just everything aligned. The stars aligned. I was pouring. I'm like, oh, it's happening.
Just in time for the pod. I love it. It's like God knew that you were coming on this show and you're like, we have to give Che the most perfectly frothed cup of coffee today for this recording. So
100%. For y'all watching on video, it no longer looks that pretty,
no,
but
Che
it
still
still
works
tastes
on
good.
it.
I put in the
Amazing.
work.
Yes, yes, you did. Well, I'm so excited to have you today. We're going to chat about all things your journey, your business, a little bit of entrepreneurship, all the things, and then just being open to whatever rabbit holes we end up digging into. But I figure a good place to start is just a brief introduction. Can you tell the world who is Chay Nott? Like if someone asks,
Whew.
how do you
So
answer?
a fun, loving, adventurous individual. I love smiling. I love making others smile. I started in the musical theater world when in like 2014. I was 12, got into that really, really heavy. Then found musical theater. So it was just like originally just like straight plays and stuff. Got into musical theater. That was a ton of fun. Did that from like 2016 through 2019. Was going super, super hardcore. Would go to different classes, training. Started taking dance in 2020 as well. But everything was going. I was ready to dive headfirst into that world until the pandemic hit, sent everybody home. And that industry in particular was very harsh about not doing anything until mandates were lifted. You didn't have to be vaxxed, things of that nature, which I personally disagree with. But that was what was going on. And so I stepped back from that because it made it incredibly difficult to be involved in that world because
Mm,
they would basically say no if anything happened with any disease ever.
mm-hmm.
So it made it very difficult. Sitting at home, playing video games, waiting, watching TV, waiting for the world to go back to normal as they said it would, became taxing when I realized that the 2 weeks became three, the three became four, and I was sitting and doing nothing productive, and something inside of me just did not feel right about that. I didn't feel right sitting around, waking up each day, playing games until I went to bed, watching TV, just trying to call friends and be on calls and just sit around and lose brain cells while we're just waiting, for
Mm.
what? For what? What's going to happen? Am I going to go back to theater or find a job in the meantime? Where can I find a job where I'm not going to have to do things I don't want to do? Not a great place for me to be in, especially I was an extremely extroverted person. So a lot of my socialization came through going out, came through being a part of large groups of people, which is not something I could do anymore. YouTube University became a safe haven for me.
Mm.
I had started doing photography, very just elementary level photography for a company called Grad Images a couple years prior, like 2016 or something like that. 2017, actually, I started working with them. And then I still had some of the camera gear from that, as well as my mom was a photographer for as long as I can remember. And so I had that gear, and I was like, well, maybe I could like create some content. I was big into a Gary Vee, uh, binge at that point. I was
Mm-hmm.
watching a ton of his content. I was like, well, I can just create content around the thing that I love, which is theater and dance and singing and dancing on stage. That was the whole thing. And so I was like, this is cool. Okay. So I started learning about how to film, how to take pictures, stuff like that. 10, 12-hour days, 14-hour days, just watching videos, learning about the photography, videography industries. That turned into just weeks on months on, ultimately it went into 2021 as well, where I started reaching out to people when that was acceptable and saying, hey, can I get together with you and do like a shoot for you? I had some people that had businesses. I had some people that were graduating high school. I had some people that were just wanted to go out and take fun pictures. Hey, can we go out together and can I do this for you for free? I just want to experiment with some things. You do that enough times, you start to build up a little bit of experience, a little bit of momentum. 2021 goes into 2022, and you start realizing that people will actually pay money for it. Good money or bad money depends on the person, but money regardless. Diving deeper and deeper into that, I've since been stacking that business, that skill, those skills on top of each other to just continue forward in the business that I'm doing. To this day, I do still intend to go back and do musical theater at some point in my life, just not as the sole one thing. To this day, I'm currently working to build up a media agency that works with brands and businesses to create commercials and media content that they can use to build their business from where it is to somewhere that is bigger than where it is now. And then possibly do some music videos and weddings on the side, but mostly focused on the branding side.
Yeah. Wow, that is so amazing to hear. And I'm especially intrigued because we've been connecting for a bit now, a few months, and I never even knew that side of the story from you. And that's why I was like especially excited to dive in and unpack your journey, and ask specific questions of like, how did
Yeah.
you get to where you are today? Because I'm always so fascinated by origin stories. And I think what's really interesting is I think for many of us, because I personally started my business during the pandemic as well, it like pushed me, and it's really fascinating to hear the nudges that were kind of presented to you in that path. It seems like at the beginning you just reached this level of discomfort and monotony that then kind of opened the doors to lead you on the next path and the next path, and it sounds like it was a really organic thing. If you were to pinpoint that, I don't know if we call it a quality or a trait that kept you going to the next thing, is it, would you say you were driven more so by curiosity? Was it more so unfulfillment, especially knowing that you were in that kind of a, we can call it maybe of a rock bottom place where you didn't know what to do? You were really unfulfilled. What would you say was that thing that kept you going on to the next thing that eventually got you to where you are today?
That thing that kept me going. Um, I don't know if there's a thing that really kept me going other than just blissful curiosity, just wanting to like
Mm,
constantly keep learning about new things. But then why would I want to keep learning and moving forward? I'm not sure what just had me going,
mm,
because every day, I would feel like, for I guess I was chasing, like, at first with the Gary Vee binge, it was like happiness, 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 which gets you as far as it does. Um, because at some point it kind of has to be a little bit practical, because happiness isn't. I guess I had a bad definition of what happiness meant,
Mm.
and so chasing that only gets you as far as it does. And then it became financial. So I'm like, okay, let me chase. Let me just make a bunch of money. How can I charge more and more and more and more and more and more and more for what I'm doing? And I felt an enormous high from getting somebody to say yes to the service that I provided, and then collecting the cash and doing the service and whatever. And then I realized that I would say late 2020, I'm sorry, late 2022, I was doing fairly well, producing anywhere between, well, what I consider to be fairly well for where I was at, which was between like $5,000 and $8,000 every single month in revenue that we were doing,
Mm-hmm.
just consistently doing a bunch of shoots and stuff like that, to, taking a decent amount of money home in my own pocket, to that going away. And I took my foot off the gas during that time, because I was like, life's good, clients are coming in, we're all right. Took my foot off the gas, and then when everything stopped, my momentum stopped as well, because my foot was taken off the gas. And I realized that during the time when I took my foot off the gas and I was riding the 3 or 4 months where clients were just kind of coming in, money was good, shit was happening, um, that feeling from, A to B during that period, to after, when I realized that it was all tanking, financial difficulties ensued, and from when I started hustling again
Mm-hmm.
to where I'm at now, the last 4 months for me have been so much better than those 4 months when I was making a bunch of money, when I was doing, what I thought was like the North Star of like money coming in, things doing good. So I guess I would say in the earlier days, it was whatever I idolized, which first was like happiness, then was make content and you can get paid for that. And then it was just make a bag, make a bag, make a bag.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was sit back while the thing just does itself. And now I would argue that I find immense happiness and drive from more so the actions and the fulfillment I get from being disciplined, which is the hardest part.
Wow. You touched on so many interesting things there. And, the question that I posed, I realized I'm like, it's a seemingly simple, but can get really deep,
Right.
because ultimately we're asking, what is the driver? Like, what drives and motivates you to do the
Yeah.
things that you do? Because you expressed when you were starting off, you're like, you would spend, 10, 11, 12 hours diving into the thing. And so at the beginning, it's like, there's something so, you think about flow state, right? Like you get into it, you have your blinders on, you're like, oh, there's just something so magical about it. What is that thing? Maybe it's curiosity, maybe it's passion, maybe it's fulfillment. You mentioned it's happiness. And it's beautiful to hear how your journey unfolded and how it transitioned from that idea to happiness to then monetary. And then it kind of went tanking. Almost, it sounds like, to have you take a step back and reassess and kind of reconnect with,
Yeah.
I don't want to say more authentic or truthful, but I do feel like there could be a sticky trap that people could get into when they're just chasing the financial goals, the financial gains, and all that. And when I look
Yeah.
back, actually, at my 2 years in business too, I can now clearly, because I've also had an up and down year, and we've talked about this, the challenges of entrepreneurship and what happens when there's a dry season and all that. And
Yeah.
I've
When you
really
realize
been,
there's no money coming through, that's
yeah.
scary.
Oh, yeah. And I've
I'm like, oh
really,
God.
I know. And I've really sat with this myself. And I'm like, you know, business for me, the first year was fantastic. The second year was even better. And it makes me reflect and think, oh, did I savor and appreciate all that I did and how hard I work and the money I made? Did I take it for granted? And I had this conversation with a friend actually recently, where we were reflecting on this. And it's not that I would regret anything, because I feel like the money that I
Mm-mm.
spent and the experiences I had, they were all so worthwhile. So it's not necessarily about that. But I think, I mean, it's always a thing where you're just moving forward and you're learning and you're reflecting. And it sounds like for you had to go through that dip to kind of now come to
Hmm.
where you are today, which is a new, I don't even want to say a new place, but it sounds like a more rooted place in kind of the rationale behind all that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was the tough part is like breaking it down even further to really know that like the person that I was at those two different points in time. One of them was chasing like one goal and just thought that like as long as money was being made, like none of the other stuff mattered. And the person that I am now, I would like to think, and I'm working towards achieving, is being undeniable day to day, so
Mm,
that when that happens again, like where I was 6 months ago, when like stuff was just happening, then it only gets better from there, because on top of getting a lot of work, getting a lot of clients, getting a lot of stuff, getting a lot of money, now there's an exceedingly high work ethic behind it that was there ish. You know, I was working hard, don't get me wrong, but I took my foot off the gas because I was like, well, I was chasing money and I got money, so we're set.
mm-hmm.
But I, like I said before, I didn't find nearly as much. I thought I was fulfilled. I was like, money's good, we're set. But now in hindsight, now like being able to compare and contrast the two scenarios from when that was happening to the hustle that I'm in now, I almost like this more. It's more stressful and there's more problems to solve, but or probably, but I find more fulfillment in this type of person who
Mm-hmm.
is consistently doing actions with no like visible upside, knowing that it's creating a momentum that in 5 years is going to be the only upside.
Yeah, 1000%. And as you were speaking, I was thinking of the word purpose. Because I think, and this is something I explore deeply with my clients whenever we get into strategy or branding. It's like what do we anchor into for your business if you're an entrepreneur, creative, whatever it is, that everything comes back to, and ultimately, to use a home analogy because that's my shtick, it's the foundation. It's where everything sits upon. Because maybe we can, again, to use an analogy, it's like if we compare chasing money to, like, the framing or the finishes. Storm comes, that washes it away, and you're left, with nothing. Whereas if you build upon your purpose, which is, what you're connected to, your driver, your ultimate driver, beyond any of those monetary, material things, you're going to have a really rooted place to always come back to. And just hearing from you speak, and even before we press record, you were sharing some of the projects that you're working on. Um, and I mean, specifically, the one that you were discussing is you didn't even ask for much monetary compensation. You're just doing this because you know that it's such an opportunity. And
Mm-hmm.
so, for me, at least in this conversation at this point, like speaking to you, it's like it's very clear to me that there's so much more beyond the monetary compensation there. It goes deeper than that. And like you said, that effect of, or the mention of the ripple effect, I'm so for that. And I've been really navigating this for myself too. It's like, saying yes to work that may not offer the money up front, but knowing that, okay, there's something so much deeper here that I can get in return, whether that's a connection or
Mm-hmm.
some sort of, you know, just other recognition or growth that I also, because I think there's a level of trust that's required in this too. It's like you're not just going in blindly in it, right? And I guess I can ask you on that note, it's like, what is your relationship with trust, and like how do you feel about that being in part too, because you're doing these things, yes, because they offer fulfillment, but I imagine there's a level of trust too, maybe in thinking that this is going to get me somewhere eventually, or maybe there's something eventually that will come out of it.
A lot of my experience thus far has been like a lot of the actions I've taken from the time that I started up until I would say December of 2022 were taken with 100% ignorance to how the world actually like works. It was just
Mm.
me trying my hand at a few things that I vaguely understood. Now, having been through that and going through the phase I'm at now, I'm starting to be able to recognize patterns. I bring that up because what you were talking about earlier brought a quote to my head from this book that I'm reading right now.
Mm.
that says winners never don't do the basics. And that's what I'm reverting back to right now is I realized from what, literally looking back and saying, okay, from middle of 2020 through the end of 2022, what did I do? What did that get me? How did the momentum work at this time, at this point in my life, with these types of calls and these meetings to get me to where I was at, and what stopped during the time when it all stopped?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm starting to go to recognizing those patterns, or recognizing a pattern potentially, implementing some things back into my daily life. And for me, that's going to be reaching out to people like I was doing before. For me, that's going to be doing spec work, reaching out to people saying, hey, I made this video for you. Hope you like it. Go for it. Or taking pictures of products, things like that, and just sending these out to people. That's a lot of the stuff that I did. And I'm seeing the exact same response with people coming back and saying, this is awesome. All right, now let's do something for real. Or I'm getting people, I'm posting that content that I'm making, and other people who see it are reaching out to me and saying, this content that you made for this brand is awesome. They don't know that I didn't make it for the brand. I just made it for the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, this content's awesome. We want to do something like that. And booking based off of that. To relate that back to your trust statement, I'm able to trust that all of this is going to work because it's already worked. I
Mm.
just stopped it.
That's so good.
And I'm
Yeah.
I and this is not like $1 million business stuff because I've never been at that level. This is like getting started type of stuff, like sub $10,000 a month type stuff, and this is
Mm-hmm.
mostly going to resonate for those people. Maybe this is relevant for the people, the big dogs, the bigger players, but for somebody who's doing under $10,000 a month, this is the stuff that worked for me and got me up to 85, $9,000 months.
Mm-hmm.
Doing the work for people without expectation of return and consistently doing the basics, never making it fancy. So far, that is working for me. Again, it already worked for me the first time, and now I'm trying it again. I'm trying old things again, a lot of the basics that I was doing originally again, and they're working nearly identically under. They're actually working faster this time because
Mm-hmm.
I have more experience, bigger portfolio, more momentum, and more experience. So,
Mm.
if that helps.
Yeah,
Yes, I
no,
do trust.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm taking that personally as a little reminder for myself as well. Because it almost, I mean, it sounds like you essentially did a self audit of
Yeah.
just reflecting on the last few years. And I've been sitting with this so much because, as business owners, there's so much unpredictability, right? I mean, to a certain level, and I think maybe ultimately it comes down to the personality. I'm someone who likes to be a controller. I'm definitely a planner. So there's a level of knowing and certainty that gives me a lot of comfort. I imagine like for a lot of people, but in the business of business, and especially the things that we do, I think we had talked about this, but like at any day, a lead could come through, right? Like someone can come into your inbox, but there is a level of control I think that we can bring, and it sounds like to what you're speaking of is you showing up and taking the action and doing the work. And to your point, yes, having the trust, but also having that tangible evidence that you did this before and it could work again. So I'm pocketing
Yeah.
that for myself a little bit
That
as
helps.
a
It helps me. It helps me a lot in doing a lot of the other things. So, like a lot of the things that I've taken control of more recently have also been my physical health as well. What I'm eating, working out, things of that nature, and understanding that being a better person in those ways, going to bed earlier, getting up earlier, and stuff like that, also plays into me being better and being able to accomplish those tasks better. So I already know that those tasks work because they worked for me once before, and they're starting to work for me again. But if I take control of all the other things that make me a better human being by exercising frequently, watching what I eat, getting to bed a little earlier and waking up earlier, those things that personally help me achieve those other small things better, now I can take control and I can trust even more so that it's going to work to an even bigger degree and that I'm going to be even more undeniable if somebody were to externally do an audit of my life, just like you said.
yeah, it's the overlap
That's what
between.
I'm trying at least. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's the overlap between personal and professional, but they bleed into each other so much. And I guess this brings me, you mentioned the word discipline, and this was actually a talking point that I was sitting on, getting into with you, because when I was reflecting on how we got connected, and there was this like very inherent natural kind of like, oh, we just get each other. So that's why, and we've continued our little
Yeah.
monthly chats and check-ins, which I love. And that's why I knew, I'm like, I gotta get Chay on the pod so we could dive deeper into this. But what I loved, from our first initial reconnection, and then even diving deeper as we've continued to connect, is understanding that there's like this similarity between us of, what do I call it? Yes, it's discipline. Yes, it's motivation, but like, maybe I use the word hardcore for lack of a better term. Like, we are committed to our shit.
Very, very much so.
Yeah. And so I was thinking about this and I'm like, huh, I kind of want to ask you regarding this idea of discipline and motivation. Where does that come from for you? Have you always had this, or have you recognized that it's gotten bigger, or you've connected with it on an even deeper level since having started your own business? Because businesses are so personal to us, and I truly
Sure.
believe when you're aligned with something that you love, like, you know, what is that expression, like, if you love what you're doing, it doesn't feel like you're ever working or whatever. So but on that topic of discipline, has that always been something that you've had, or has that recently really ignited in for you?
I didn't always really have it. I had a lot of passion and um, uneducated optimism, you could call it.
I love that.
Just diving into everything head first, wanting to put my all into it, and then realizing very quickly if I didn't want to, and then it would slack. I would not be disciplined about accomplishing the task that I committed to, regardless of if I liked it or not. So to answer your question, no, it hasn't always been there. It has been something that more recently, like I thought I had in through 2020, and now looking back, the person that I am now would kick that guy's ass every day of the week.
Mm,
The mindset shift, because it ultimately was a mindset shift that I had to make. And for me, it started with my political views and switching up with that, but it bled into this as well. It is the mindset shift was, it is not something I can do. It's not something I want to do. I don't want to build it. I do. I'm not saying I don't want to, but I'm saying I don't want to build this. I don't want to be more physically fit. I don't want to be, because if I just want it, then it's like, to what degree, how bad do you want it? And then it can fall short. I made the shift into believing that it was an obligation to
mm,
somebody that I don't know, who will someday rely on me for what I'm going to do now. And just getting out of bed with the notion of like, you're obligated to this shit.
mm.
Um, you have to do this for somebody that's going to rely on your payroll someday. You have to do this for somebody who is lost and might use you as a guiding light. It doesn't matter if you're lost too, you just have to do a little better. Um, so when it comes to working out, anytime I've ever like wanted to not do it, the guilt of looking back on, and I use physical fitness because a lot of people can relate to this, the guilt that you feel of not working out, and then the immediate justification of like, well, you had all this stuff and you didn't want to, but that guilt eats me up more than the workout does. um, the guilt of having a uncomfortable conversation with my client about a late delivery eats me up more than sitting up or working for an extra 3 hours on a video project, to get it done on time or ahead of schedule even. But I'm obligated to do it regardless.
Yeah, it sounds like, you've connected with this intrinsic level of responsibility that,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
yeah, that you feel, well, you are very, very connected to, but that, it sounds to me like, is the driver for you. And it's beautiful the way that you put it too, especially hearing that you haven't always been this way, but you found it within yourselves, which is really hopeful, I think, for people listening who might struggle with cultivating that motivation. Um, I wonder too if, and I feel like it's pretty clear from what what you're sharing, is you love what you do, and there's a fulfillment that you get, that I imagine that it's a little easier for you to harness that motivation, because I would imagine
Yeah.
if you're like, if you're in an unfulfilling desk job or something where you're kind of dreading showing up every day, it could be a little bit tougher. Granted, I think there is something to be said about keeping your eye on the prize and like, okay, if where I'm at right now isn't where I'm meant to be, if I'm in this now, but I can give it my best and I still have my eye on the future prize, which is I'm getting out of this to find something better, or I'm working on something on the side, then there's that kind of intrinsic motivation that can get fostered as well.
Yeah, it definitely makes it tougher doing things that like you don't want to do.
Mm,
For me, I haven't really worked normal jobs for very long, so like I don't have a ton of experience there, so I can't really speak to it. Most of the unpleasant stuff that I've done has been like day or week, like week long work or whatever. That's just been like, okay, I just got to get through this day, and I'm gonna do it super hardcore, and then whatever the next
yeah.
day. There is a certain level of like passion for what I do. There's a certain amount of fulfillment that I do get from the work, but the goal is not to love what I do every single day, but to build myself into the person that regardless of whether or not I like it or not, the shit gets done and it gets done better than anybody else is going to do it regardless.
Mm.
Um, Now that being said, it does help that I actually enjoy
Yes.
picking up a camera and filming and stuff. I do love that. But the mission is only to build myself into an undeniable human that can do anything, regardless of anything, of feeling, of whatever, and make it simply just objective. Objectively, this needs to get done. Objectively, I can't not operate. I'm going to not be able to pay somebody's payroll one day or whatever because I'm gonna like not do this right now or I'm gonna watch Netflix
Mm-hmm.
instead. Um, so operating as if it's my obligation, regardless of feeling, is the ultimate goal. And there's a lot of things that go into practicing that as well. So it's not just like a mental switch. I had to do a lot of things to build myself into the person that can make that mental switch as well. That's something a lot of people they're like, "How do you make that mental switch?" I'm like, "Well, I've been working on myself for 2.5 fucking years, so try that first."
Mm.
Um, so
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear that. I hear that. And again, it's really interesting to hear your perspective on this because I think there's something that I've been sitting with for myself recently in navigating this idea of, we can call it the hardcoreness for myself. And it's something that I realized I think I carried a lot of shame around for a good while because there's this level of perfectionism that I bring into my work that has always been a part of me. And I think for a long part of my life, it's been operating out of this place of I'm seeking external validation or
mm,
I need to do this so that I can, get the approval or whatever. And I feel like to date it's served me very well because it's gotten me in a lot of regards to where I am, and I have such a hardcore work ethic and all of that stuff. And it wasn't up until recently that I realized like, okay, this isn't for anyone else but me. My business really illuminated that for me in a lot of regards. But something that I heard recently, I follow this woman who's like a financial empowerment speaker. She was talking about the level of, she called it insanity. She's like, the level of insanity that I bring into my business. And she like very clearly spoke to herself as being insane, but like in a really beautiful way where she's so good at what she does and she's so committed to what she does, but she owns it. And she even gave like a silly example of like she tells her team that like she doesn't like the space between the emoji or something in like a letter in like emails or something. Like, this is hilarious because I could see myself being the perfectionist that I am, kind of bringing that like attention to detail in certain instances. But hearing her talk about it, it's like she fully embraced her like critical eye and level of detail. And I sat with it afterwards and I reflected. I'm like, wow, I almost feel like I have permission to embrace the fact that I'm so just, there is that perfectionist side of me because it allows me to do the work that I do and it allows me to be so good at what I'm doing. And so this brings up the question for me. It's like you spoke to the motivation coming from something internal. I think that there's so many different ways that we could look at it, but when it comes to running a business and for any entrepreneurs, who are leading their things, I feel like there is, we could call it like a recipe maybe for someone who's meant to be doing this. What would you say, just in your opinion, like what does it take to run a business and be, cut out for this? And you alluded to, yes, there's passion, yes, there's fulfillment, there could be a connection to purpose, but based on your experience and just from what
Mhm.
you've navigated yourself with your business, what would you say are some, we can call them like essential qualities of a business owner?
Sure. Um, I'm not experienced enough to speak to that on a fundamental level. The biggest shifts that I recognized early and have hit me probably the hardest have been reasonable expectations of time.
Hmm.
Things don't happen as quickly. You need to be able to try something out for not a week, not a month, but like you need to give something 6 months at bat to see if it's going to work. Depending on the scale of the thing, maybe you could get results in a week and make a decision. Maybe you could get results in a year and make a decision. But you have to be able to judge the scale of that thing and what might be a reasonable expectation of time, one based on your resources and two based on reality. Like, yeah, you may only have $600 and that's only going to get you a month, but should you not do that thing until you can afford to do it for 3 months? Whatever. I'm not, that's just kind of a random example I'll pull, but that has probably been one of the more impactful things is time, and never underestimate um, the power that going the extra mile when you are not paid to do so
Mm,
provides. um, a willingness to do one of those two things will get somebody, in my opinion, far enough that they will discover if this game is for them or not. And maybe they'll go super far, get to $100,000 a year, get to five, get to a million, get to a couple million, and then realize it's not for them and come back. But I'm not nearly experienced enough to speak to the qualities of an entrepreneur because frankly I'm 21 years old and I've never had a business that's done more than $100,000 a year. I'm not qualified to speak
mm,
on qualities of an entrepreneur because I haven't been to a scale yet where even I can make a decision on whether or not this game is for me.
yeah, no, that's really, really valid. And I mean, you even spoke at the beginning, like you were kind of derailed in this way almost unexpectedly with the situations that you were navigating during the pandemic, and you still have your sight set to reconnecting to your
Mm-hmm.
original plan of theater. But I think it's always so interesting when I think about the different paths that unfold for us in life. Like say the pandemic hadn't happened, like would you have followed that path?
Mm-hmm.
And what that could have evolved to be. But I appreciate your answer, and I totally hear you on that. I think, you know, there's so much that we could say from our own experiences, and obviously, we follow. I know from you, I'm really inspired because you're following a lot of people, inspirational people to kind of follow, essentially, get garner inspiration from in their footsteps. And I'm always for opening myself up to also unpacking like what is this that it looks like for me, because business right now for me is like so fulfilling, but that could change in who knows, like that could look so
Mm-hmm.
different from a year. I think the thing that's kept me going is similar to you. There's this deep level of fulfillment that I've aligned to. I think when I work with clients specifically, for me, the transformation is so rewarding. It's when I do something for a client and their mind is blown. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's like, oh, I could do that. Like I can serve them in that way. So there's an activation of gifts, if we want to call it that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you were starting out, how did you find the, I don't know if we call it the drive to pitch your first people in those early stages, because you're self-taught. I think for a lot of people who
Mm-hmm.
are on that similar path, there could be a lot of self-doubt or imposter syndrome, like who am I? um was it just something that you felt like, oh, I got to do this, I got to try? Or were you certain in your capabilities at that point? Like what did that look like for the first clients that you pitched, those early days starting out?
I've been all over the board, like with the stuff that I've pitched. So I've been pitching social media content, I've pitched commercials, highlight video ads, recaps, like just anything that involved me being behind the camera, I've like pitched for the most part. Um, a lot of like the original like first clients, a lot of it was uh, I don't know, uneducated sales pitching. So I was like over explaining to the clients. I was like kind of in that phase of trying to explain to them why social media is so important and all that fun jazz. And it didn't land me a ton of gigs, and a lot of the original gigs I got was mostly just, hey, we've got this event coming up, or we want to market this location, or we've got this new product coming out. We want to make some content for it. I say, okay, yep, I can make content for it. And then I would just, for a while, it was just throwing out a price that I was like, maybe I can get this. And I'd throw it out. And if they say yes, awesome. And if they say no, okay, move on. There is a certain level of like imposter syndrome, if you want to call it that, that comes along where it's just like, like there's so many people out here that are doing this stuff like crazy good. The fun part is being a part of those productions and realizing that they're really not all that much better than you are. They're just doing it with nicer toys.
Hmm.
Um, so that's fun. But the first few clients, it really was just, hey, I've got a camera. I would love to take some pictures for the location. If you guys can afford it, this is, what I would love to charge, but I'd love to work with you guys. And if they'd say no, I'd be like, okay. A lot of my first clients came from like price, the compromise on price.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those clients are pains in the asses. Don't compromise on price if you don't have to. But it got me a lot of my original work, and those people have since fueled a portfolio that's gotten me significantly better clients. A lot of my best work has come from referrals where I did free work first. So some of my best clients have come from when I said, hey, uh, ex business owner, CrossNet's a great example of one. I reached out when they put out a post saying, hey, we're looking for some people that, want to create some fun social media UGC videos for us. We're sending out some of our units for people that want to do it. I said, I'll do that. They sent the unit. I made some videos in the quality that I can with the equipment that I have. And they were like, these are freaking awesome. And we've done lots of work together since then, as well as they have since referred multiple people who have paid me over 10, 15, $20,000 each for
Yeah.
like different referrals and stuff like that. So the best referrals always have come from like the freebies, or like the going the
Mm-hmm.
extra mile without being paid to do so type stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine too. I wonder if there's like, not that this is probably direct, but maybe like subliminally, there's this energy, if we want to call it, of those free referrals are those that like, because especially money's not, on the table, like you are pouring your pure heart into it, and that is it. Whereas, if someone's paying you, like you're doing the job. Yes, you definitely could be pouring your heart into it, but you're getting compensated. But without any of that compensation, someone just sees your love and drive and commitment and quality without anything. So I feel like there could be maybe an element of that. It's like, wow, you did this and we didn't even compensate you. And I imagine too there's a willingness, especially if you're pitching those free opportunities, or if you're compromising, there's an openness and a willingness from you on your end to do the work, and then ultimately, you'll get rewarded for it, for all of that, because I always believe in that stuff. You don't always, I mean, yes, sometimes things happen and whatever, nothing unfolds, but I feel like more often than not, you pour your heart into something, you'll see the effects of that at some point. Maybe it's not the way that you anticipated it to be, but it'll come back around. So I'm always an advocate of that too. And I can speak for myself. I've done a lot of free work. I've gotten a lot of beautiful referrals, and it's gotten me to where I am today with my business.
Yeah.
So I'm all for that. Yeah.
I'm a huge believer in the law of reciprocity.
Yes, yes, reciprocity. That is a perfect way there to
Huge.
describe that. Yeah, definitely. What has been something surprising about running your business?
How much it costs to run
So valid, so good.
how much it costs to run a goddamn business. um no, it's wild when you do like almost more payroll than like you make in a year. You're like, oh, I see how it is.
Mm,
um in all seriousness, surprising. um I wouldn't say any of it has been surprising, because I didn't have a North Star for my expectations.
mm,
So like all I expect, like when I was much younger, I was like expecting to make millions. So I was surprised when that didn't happen. But in all seriousness, other than that, it was just I have this thing. Let me see if other people want the thing. And now that I know that they kind of do, figuring out how to continue to push that forward. So I haven't really had many expectations. I'm not a big goal setter. I'm not like a big, 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, 5-year type goal person. It's
Mhm.
just forward, at least in this phase of my life that's working for me. And I don't know. There's not a lot of expectations to be surprised by when
Yeah,
it
no,
doesn't happen.
that's actually really really great. And as someone, I'm speaking for myself here, this the part of me that sometimes likes to really control and feel like I need a plan. I've tried all the things, the 5 year, the 3 year vision, all that stuff. But what you touched on, the idea of expectations, that is huge because it's always when we set the expectations and they're not met, then we're disappointed. But to what you said about moving forward, if it's just like one foot after the other every day. And I mean, this is all to say too, like I imagine, I mean, you shared this. It's like, you know, things could change so quickly and new opportunities can come at any point and you could get referred like you don't have there's that level of like surrender I think that is so needed where you just have to trust that things are
Hmm.
going to come unfolding for you the way that they're
Yeah,
meant
it's
to.
like adaptability. You have to just
Yeah.
if something comes your way, you have to gut check yourself. Does this feel right? If it feels right, can I do it? Okay, if I can do it, should I? And then just do it, and then don't regret it afterwards.
Yeah,
Like
for sure, be
there's no
all
going
in.
backwards.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure, be all in. um I want to ask about your team a little bit because I was poking around your website before we jumped on the call. And I was so surprised to see that you have such a large team on your website, and just working for your company. So I'm curious, how did the journey of growing your team, or just if you can speak to collaboration in general, how that's unfolded and what your process looks like for bringing on team members when you decide to outsource? What does that all look like?
So technically, it's all outsourced. So I keep everything inside of the U.S. It's just a personal thing. I want to keep it like that. Every single person that you see on that page is somebody that I would consider a friend, somebody that I have done work with many times. All of them right now are Florida based. So we're all just like scattered throughout Florida, Tampa, Miami. My process is I need something, I find somebody, and if they do good work, I try them again. And if they do good work again and they're cool, they're in. They're somebody I can call on. If I can rely on them, they do good work and they do good work consistently, and I like them and we can get along. That's it. That's the whole thing. Everybody is a contractor on the site, so I don't have any full time employees. I don't have people that are working for me on a regular cadence for the most part. Everybody was just brought in to fulfill a different need at a different time. Evan and I started at the same time and have been building our businesses side by side. We've been best friends for a long, long, long time, many, many years. Started videography at the same time, built that up. So he and I have been rocking and rolling there. And anytime I get a production where I need another videographer or like a photographer or an editor or somebody to help out, those are the people that I call on, and
Yeah.
that's why they're there. And they do consistent work, they do it very well, and they always have a great attitude about it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I was curious specifically on asking on the team, and I guess I can ask a follow-up question to that is,
Mm-hmm.
has was there any resistance to you outsourcing? I think especially knowing your level of quality and discipline that you bring to your
Right.
business, because there's that part of me too that's like, oh, am I going to trust someone to do this as good as I can or better? So did you navigate any of those feelings when?
So I did.
Yeah.
I was scared, but I lost a decent amount of money trying people out and overpaying. Like I pretty much consistently overpay anytime I do anything in my business. My people are treated extremely well financially, and I try to make the experience as good for everybody, make sure everybody's relaxed, everybody's having a good time on top of everything. And that's one thing that I pride myself on is not just great products, but also having a great company culture on the inside where everybody is paid extremely well, everybody's having a good time, and everybody can be friendly with everyone. That's the entire goal, which makes us do better work as a byproduct. Finding people that can do work really just came down to I would do the work, and then I'd hire somebody to do the work as well, and I would give the client whichever work I liked better, and that's how I tried out editors for the
Mm,
most part. So
that's
I
interesting.
lost money that way because I was paying money that would have gone into my pocket to pay somebody else to try them out. But at the end of the day, I would just give them the work, and then I would give them instruction. I'm very detail oriented, so any time I would send them footage, I would send them a fairly detailed breakdown as well of what I was looking for, how they should do it, how I've done it in the past, good examples, and then say, here, go. And then depending on how close they got to it on the first try, would kind of I could determine their competency just because I am an editor myself. I am a videographer myself. I am a photographer myself. So I know what makes a good one. And if they can't follow those directions, they wouldn't get extra work from me. If they were slow to respond, wouldn't get any extra work from me. Every single person that you see on that page has fast communication, good, consistent work, a great attitude about it, and is more than happy to, consistently do those three things on repeat.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It sounds like there was a little bit of testing at the beginning, but you've gotten
Yep.
into a groove. And I would venture to say that having the ease, the increased flexibility from outsourcing and being able to depend on a team has just probably, definitely shown you that it's so, so worthwhile and so
Yeah.
valuable to
The
have.
quality, the quality of the product went up as well.
Yeah.
The photos that we were delivering when I wasn't multitasking and doing photos and directing a video shoot, dramatically better. The
Mm,
video that we were able to produce when I had Evan and JB helping me film, so I wasn't the only videographer and directing everything. I could take a step back, maybe film a little bit, but be directing for the most part. And like Evan or JB would be filming, their footage would look dramatically better because they're not multitasking either. Emma
yeah.
and Jen are not multitasking either. Stephanie is not multitasking. She is just editing. Jake is not multitasking. He is just editing. So I don't have a bunch of things that are filling my mind. I don't have to worry about the editing. I don't have to worry about the videography. I don't have to worry about the photography. I can just do my thing, put on the productions and video if I want to.
Yeah.
But I have people that's their sole focus. So I'm not scatterbrained because I can rely on them. They're not scatterbrained because I've taken care of most of the brunt work so they can do their job. Stephanie and Jake aren't scatterbrained because they just receive great footage at the end of the day and then put it all together into a great product. And that's their one job for the 3 days that they have work from me. The quality of the product, it does not stop going up.
Yeah, I love this. And this is so speaking onto the point of just everyone sticking in their zone of genius lane.
I, I do want to say though, for anybody listening to this who thinks, get a big team, go for it. You can
Mm,
outsource, the
hmm
product is better, make so much more money. Uh, I'm actually losing a lot of money by having that, but the quality of the product goes up, which means we can charge more in the future. So just understand, hiring the team did not make for a dramatically more financially successful business. It actually took away a lot of the profit margins and it took away a lot of that stuff, but you're going to get a better product and a better reputation, better turnaround time, and better referrals for it every single time, which is the only thing that has happened to me is I just get a better product, better showcase. I can say what we can do with more pride and more confidence because I know it's going to happen if I put these people on the project, but the money does not come immediately.
Yeah, no, I'm so, so glad you mentioned that because I think, and I've gotten into this too myself because as I started outsourcing support, I'm like, oh, I don't need to do, like, you can very quickly go a little bit too far. Like the pendulum can swing the opposite way, where, like, for me at least, I started off feeling like I need to do all of this because, again, and it's like that milestone in your business when you start outsourcing is such, at least in my experience, was such a scary one because that is like a next level. Like you're trusting someone with your personal work and, you've never done this before. So it's very uncertain. There's unknown territory, but then once you get the confirmation that, like, whoa, not only can this person support me, but they could potentially do it better than me. And then that frees up energy for me to hone in
That's
on
it.
my zone of genius. I think about that. What is it? I think, is it In-N-Out Burger where they keep their menu so tight and they have a designated person for every single job. So there's a fry man, there's a burger man, there's a milkshake man,
Yeah.
which ensures that the entire system runs so smoothly. And I mean, like, is the big thing that it is
Right.
because of that attention to quality and detail and intentionality. But I love what you shared about the kind of the allure maybe of feeling like, okay, you're going to get a big team and it's going to increase all this money. Because again, I think there is that learning curve at the beginning of finding the balance and maybe compromising a little bit of like, okay, we're still building up the portfolio, we're still building up
Yeah,
the credibility, all that stuff, and making those referrals. But going back to the idea of trust again and
yeah,
reciprocity, that's going to come back around.
right. Now,
So
there's a certain level of like, I could do $1,000 video as an independent, which is great because $1,000 goes straight into my pocket with the exception of paying for fuel and paying for food for that day of the shoot or whatever. And I could do it to the best of my ability as a solo shooter. Then, if I involve the team, you have to understand that you have to charge more because those people have to get paid. And like I said, the
yes.
people that I work with get paid fairly well. So all of a sudden, that $1,000 video turns into, okay, I cannot take on a job without losing money unless I charge more than $6,500 or
Yes.
whatever that might be, or $2,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is. You just have to understand you have to then learn how to sell $5,000 things, $8,000 things, and not $500 things or $1,000 things. It changes the game, it changes the sales conversation, and it changes how you manage your profit and loss statements and stuff like that. And running
Yeah.
payroll, whole different ball game.
Mm,
Taxes, pain in the ass, great
hmm.
time.
Yes. I can feel that.
Love it.
Get a good accountant and bookkeeper for
That's
sure
for
for
sure.
that. But that's again, that's the level of outsourcing that ultimately makes it all much easier
Yeah.
and worthwhile. Because going back to what you shared about you having more creative energy and time and focus to focus on your craft, and ultimately, it's just so much less stressful and fulfilling when you go, hone in on that. But like everything else, it's a learning curve and something to navigate. But trusting that it's all gonna come back around.
Yep.
Um, I wanted to jump to my last few closing questions for you, which I like to ask at the end of each episode. Seemingly simple, but they can get deep depending on where you want to take them. The first being, what is a piece of advice that you could share with someone who has a purpose, burning desire on their heart? Maybe it's a passion project. Maybe they do want to start their own business, but there's some fear or doubt that may be getting in their way. What would you say to that person?
The voice in your head that tells you not to do that thing, whose voice is it? How much does it matter? And what is the worst thing? What is the worst thing that's going to happen to you if it fails? Can you get a job and get yourself out of being homeless? Probably. So if the worst possible thing that could happen to you is like homelessness, I get it changes if you have like a family or something like that. I can't speak to that because I don't, as far as like wife, kids, things of that nature. But if you're young and just want to run it, what's the absolute worst thing that can happen?
Mm,
And whose voice is the one keeping you back? Because it's not yours. Usually, it's not yours. Um, and if you want to try it, you have to try it. Like nobody's doing it for you.
yeah, yeah, I love that. What does what does the word purpose mean to you when you hear that? And do you think you're currently living out your purpose?
I'm not sure what mine is. A lot of the contexts in which I've heard the word purpose have been a little bit frou frou, so I tend to ignore it for the most part because my intention right now in the phase of life that I'm in is forward. Just take a step forward, take a step forward, take a step forward. Whether this is my purpose is to be a brand creator that runs a creative agency, whether it is to be on stage, whether it is to inspire people to do those things, to serve in some other capacity, to inspire people to speak. I'm not entirely sure. Um, that's probably the best answer I can give because other than what I just gave, I tend to just ignore like what is my purpose because I don't. I'm 21. I have no idea.
Mm,
I have no
yeah.
clue. I'm here to move forward, and eventually, if I discover a purpose somewhere in there, um, then great. But
Mm,
until then, I have to keep operating regardless.
mm. No, that's great. I mean, I think that's a very honest, but also just like so direct answer of you just got to keep going because I
I
think
think a lot of people corner themselves because they want to
mm,
find like when they don't know anything, and
mhm,
I'm in a place where I don't know a lot of things, so I can speak to those people because I don't know a lot.
mhm,
Is I believe that statements like that, at least for me, were fairly cornering because when you decide that this is your purpose or this is your intention or this is X and making a definitive fact about it, it's almost like saying an I am statement. I am this, I am
mhm.
X, I am that,
Yeah.
I am good. You then tend to corner yourself in that identity, which may not serve you if you need to make a switch. It sounds fairly self-serving, but like at the end of the day, we're all just trying to do the best that we can for ourselves. And if you do it with the right intention, hopefully it'll help other people. But that's where I'm going
Yeah, no, I
right now, at
love that.
least.
I'm so glad that you shared that last part too about almost like you said the word cornering. Yes, it could be limiting in a way because if you associate and attach yourself to a label or identity, that could be you putting your blinders on from something else that could be bigger or different or better. So I could see that being such, I mean, in a way it's a double-edged sword. We could think of it that way because there is something beautiful about being or seeking that purpose and being aligned to that, and pursuing that. But when you start to get definitive and feel like you've reached a destination, that's where it could get, I feel, definitely to what your point, like a little limiting. um, and to what you're speaking to, it's like we're both so young, you know. Like you're in your early 20s.
Right.
I just turned 31 this summer, so there's so much that I know is ahead for the both of us. It's like, what's to say that we're going to be doing something completely different in the next few
Sure.
years?
I don't know if there's anything wrong with finding a purpose in anything as long as you're open to change, as long as you're not going to
Hmm.
like kill yourself over things not going the way that you originally intend, as long as
Yeah.
you're able to fluctuate and be adaptable in that way. I don't think there's anything wrong. Use
Hmm.
it's like the term use what you got. If that's what gets you forward, if that's what keeps you grinding, if that's what keeps you, doing what you're doing to the best of your ability with the most heart possible, truly your best, not just what you think is your best,
Hmm.
then use it. But
Yeah.
don't corner yourself either.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Ultimately, I believe that it is something that we have inside of ourselves. It reveals itself differently in different points of our lives. And I think there's a level of awareness that some
Mm-hmm.
people either completely have no semblance of, because you could ask some people like what their purpose is and they've never thought about it, and that's okay, because
Yep.
that's, yeah, that's okay, that's for them. And then there's other people that are like, oh, I'm constantly searching for it, and they're on that path. But then there's others that may say that they are definitively in alignment. And I love asking this question because I've gotten so many different responses, and I feel like there is no right answer because everyone has such a different perspective on it. But it's always so beautiful to hear how people react and respond to that and where they're at on their journey. So maybe we'll check
Mm-hmm.
back in like a couple of years, or like, you know, we'll do an
Hell yeah.
episode two, and I'll re-ask the question and see how it's
Hell yeah.
evolved. Okay, my last question, which is my ultimate favorite. So this show is called the Homecomings Podcast because, as you know, everything I do is rooted in this notion of home. So I want to ask you, what is your favorite memory of home? Or if you think of that word home, what comes to mind?
That's so funny. It's almost like I think of the different places that I've lived. I think of the different memories that I have of each of those different places. A lot of the people that have been there. A lot of the people that haven't been there. Um, that's so funny that I actually am struggling to almost come up with an
Mm,
answer. I've been so narrow focused on what I've been doing that whole concept of like home. I've got a somewhat interesting home life.
mm,
It's I don't know. Re-ask the question. I want to see if anything comes to mind through your full explanation.
yeah. What is your favorite memory of home? Or when you think of the word home, what comes to mind?
So, favorite memories. A lot of them have to do with, there's a lot of small moments at home for me. Long history with like my dad and stuff like that. And there's a lot of memories that I have. I wouldn't say a lot as an abundance, but there's a few core ones of he and I doing things together because he's got some issues that really stand out, between like throwing a frisbee around, between we like to shoot, so doing that together, biking and bike a little bit. So a lot of my favorites, I would say a lot of the things that I look back very fondly of are things like that. Um, we lived on before this house, we lived on a much bigger property that was about 10 acres of land. It was a lot of land, and it was just expansive. We had this creek in the backyard that ran all the way and basically cut our property in half. And the property that we lived on used to be where we were guessing like some kind of like Indian tribe or something resided, because in that creek was just hundreds of natural arrowheads and
Wow.
rock knives and stuff like that. So he and I, and my mom and I too, and my friends and I would go down there, but he and I would go down there and we would dig around and we'd find these arrowheads. I mean, there were hundreds of them down there. Those are some of the favorites.
That is so
Smaller things.
beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. That one's always a little bit of a wild card. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
forcing you to look back in the memory bank. But I'm always just so curious what first comes to mind for people, because it is a little bit out of the
right.
blue. And home is such a there's a ubiquity to it. I think when people hear the word, they're like, oh, there's something comforting and familiar. But it could also be anything you want it to be. So I've been pretty surprised by the responses that my guests have given me. So thank you for sharing, Chay. Can you share with people where they could find you, how they can work with you?
Sure. So finding me socially on Instagram and TikTok. So Instagram is at 5CHAY. TikTok is at 5CHAYNOTT. So my first and last name. My website is nottshotts.com, NOTTSHOTS. And that's where you can work with me to do video or photo media advertising.
Yay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chay. This is a great convo. I'm so glad you were able to come on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's always a good conversation with us.
Hi again, it's me. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully, you were able to garner some takeaways and nuggets for your personal home journey. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world if you left a rating and review. And if you'd like to connect deeper, find me at Studio Dumka on Instagram, where I share content on all things home, of course. Sending a big, cozy, homey hug your way, friends. Till next time.